Hello, everyone, and welcome to School Day at the North Texas Teen Book Festival, hosted by the Library Science Program at Sam Houston State University's College of Education. I'm Wenndy Pray. I'm a librarian at Michael E. Fossum Middle School in McAllen ISD in deep South Texas, and I'm a proud alum of SHSU. Today, I am very privileged and honored to be a part of moderating the final edit panel, which is middle grade and young adult anthology editors. They'll talk about what it takes for them to wrangle up the writers that take stories and then they put them in one complete masterpiece. I'm incredibly honored to moderate this panel today. With us is Rose Brock, who edited Hope Wins, a collection of inspiring stories for young readers. We are also with Saraciea Fennell, who edited Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed, 15 Voices from the Latinx Diaspora. We have Margarita Longoria, who edited Living Beyond Borders, Growing Up Mexican in America. And she's from where I'm from, the Valley. And then last but definitely not least, we have Kwame Mbalia, who edited Black Boy Joy, 17 stories celebrating Black boyhood. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Hello. To start, hello, yes. I would love for you all to please introduce yourselves and just share one interesting thing about you. We can start with Miss Rose.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Rose Brock, and let's see, I am my, when I'm not fighting crime at night, my day job is I'm a university professor at, and up to sometimes some no good. I'm a university professor at Sam Houston State University, and who helps bring on School Day today. We host this event. Let's see what else about me. I am the editor of two anthologies, one for YA readers called Hope Nation. And then my newest one comes out actually this May, and that's Hope Wins. And that's middle grade. And an interesting thing, I think again, children are watching, so I'm gonna skip that part. This is a family show. We'll keep it clean.
Yes.
But yes, I think the NTTBF connection. I get to wear lots of hats. Today I'm a panelist, but when I get done, I'm gonna be, I don't know, doing something fun. So that's it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kwame, tell us one interesting thing about you.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Kwame Mbalia. I am the author of several books. One interesting thing about me, I, for about 4 months, worked at Dulles International Airport, outside of Washington, D.C. And I was the person who drove, I don't know what to call it, like it's like a tugboat, but it's on wheels. I was the person who drove and pushed your plane back onto, like when you first sit down on your plane and you're getting ready to go and you guys back up onto the runway. I was the person who drove the vehicle, who pushed you back. And yes, it was a thrilling, chaotic time in my life. That job single-handedly paid for like 30 or 40 pairs of shoes. I was a rampant shoe collector at that stage in my life because I had no children, no other, nothing to pay for. I was a senior in college. So all I did was eat, push back airplanes, and buy shoes.
That is so cool. My husband also has a mild sneaker addiction, so I definitely know what that's about. That's so neat. I always wonder who does that. You know what I thought? I thought that the plane had a reverse.
That is a common misconception. Yes.
Oh my word. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is super neat. Let's now meet Ms. Margarita Longoria. Hello.
Hey, I'm Margarita Longoria. I'm Sagittarius. I'm a librarian in the high school, Mission High School, and one interesting thing about me, I don't even know, maybe I used to be a waitress. People don't believe that about me. They're like, no way you were a waitress. I don't believe that you didn't throw drinks on people. I didn't. I was a good waitress. At least I think I was. But I was a waitress for a long time, and I don't know. That's about it.
Well, that's cool. You meet a lot of interesting people when you're a waitress. I think. And also when you work at the airport, you meet a lot of interesting people. Miss Saraciea Fennell, hello.
Hi, I love all of these interesting facts. I'm sitting here like, what can I say about my life that's going to match what everyone else has said? So yes, I'm Saraciea Fennell, the editor of Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed. And I'll give you two interesting facts about me. I love ice cream. Like whenever I'm traveling, I will always look for an ice cream shop. Doesn't matter where I am. And another interesting thing about me is I am a denim collector. I don't know if people really know this about me, but I have so many denim jeans, so many denim shirts, and believe it or not, I don't actually wear a lot of denim anymore. But in my college days, it's something that like I wore every single day. I was definitely the person that you see in those magazines, denim out from head to toe, and you're like, what are they doing? Why? Why did you have to wear a denim shirt with denim jeans? It's too much. That was me. That was me.
I don't believe for a second on you anything would be too much because you're so fabulous.
I know. I'm like, you can make it work. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
The other thing that I can't believe you didn't say, like, you also, Teresa, you also were like, was it a Nike campaign? It was something like that in New York
Yes.
City. Like you were plastered everywhere. Hello, that's a pretty cool fact. I mean, I like ice cream too, but I think that's even cooler.
That's actually a really good one. I should have mentioned that.
That is so cool. That's so neat. So let's get started with anthologies. I love anthologies. I'm a former, I won't say former ELA teacher, I'll say a forever ELA teacher because you never really stop teaching. I'm now a librarian, but anthologies are one of my favorite things because it's so versatile. You can do so many things with them. So we'll start with the first question and then I'll direct it to one of you, but then anyone who wants to answer or follow up can jump in. It's totally, I would love that. So the first question would be for Rose. What does an anthology editor do exactly? Like what do you do and how long does it take to put an anthology together from when you first start with the idea to when you finally publish it?
Okay. Well, I'd love to know the answer to what an anthology editor still does because I've done two now and I'm not sure that I have it completely figured out. So in my case, and it's very possible that it's similar for my friends on here. Like I had, I won't go into the way backstory, but I had an opportunity to publish something, and my first book, which I mentioned, which is YA, I focused on hope, and actually both my anthologies focus on hope. And when I had the idea for that anthology, I'd been thinking in my personal life, I had a couple of young women who were really struggling for a variety of reasons in their life. And it got me to thinking about like when, hard times come and like, how do we unpackage that? How do we deal with it? And, all of us gathered here are legally adults. We may not always act like adults, but we are adults. And so the thing that we have that's different than you kids that are watching is that we have experience, right? So like we've had more butt time on earth than you have. And so we've had hard times come our way. And that is not unique to anyone. I mean, that is a universal truth. Life can be really hard. And for me, I'm a glasses half full kind of gal, always have been. And I also recognize that that's a privilege. I have lots of privileges, but that's certainly one of them because not everybody, it doesn't come to them necessarily that easy. So take these two young women in my life, and I started thinking about stories. I started thinking about my time before I was a professor. When I was a classroom, I was also an ELA teacher before I became a school librarian. And I thought about the books that I always used to connect kids with. And I think, books were my love language to my students. That was the way, like I tried really hard. And back then it was harder to find books where kids could see themselves. We're making progress, but we could still do better. But so I was always trying to make those connections. And I also used anthologies. So the idea for Hope Nation kind of came about that way. And I thought about like the idea of voice and how, I wanted to inspire kids. I thought about those when I was younger. There was a series of books that students loved called Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. And I thought about those books. But the thing that I thought about what I wanted to do with my anthology was that I wanted to take real people, real authors that kids already loved. Like, like I love Jason Reynolds. So like, I want to hear Jason's story, or I love Angie Thomas or many other people that were kids just couldn't get enough of. And I wanted to give them an opportunity to hear their stories. And so Hope Nation was a collection of all true stories. So I had an opportunity, I got a publisher and I worked together. My job as editor was to, number one, I got lucky enough that I got to invite the people I wanted to invite, the authors. And I got super, like, I hit the jackpot. So many amazing people said yes. So that was incredible. I also got to kind of paint the vision of what I wanted the book to become. And that's the case really with both of my anthologies, also Hope Wins, the middle grade one that's coming out, that I got to select the people. I also in turn worked with an editor in-house, but I got to be, I was the one who had the direct connection with authors. And like Kwame can probably speak to, there's a little bit of a difference when you are editing something as opposed to writing your own stories. Then you usually are just working with one person, that in-house editor, but I was like the go-between. So I had my ideas about people's stories, and then I would get, in my case, my editors in-house, their ideas. So I wore that hat too as the go-between, and I got to help writers figure out, like, I'd read their stories and say, I love this, but I feel like this is missing, or I wish you would tell me more about this. So that was really fun. It was also a little bit like herding cats. So, trying to get people to do stuff because writers are busy. And, the thing that we all have in common is that we enlisted other writers to share their stories. And so for the most part, everybody's like carving out a little bit of time in an already very busy life. And so I got to do that. And the thing that I get to do now, and that we all do, is that I get to be a champion of those stories. And that's really, again, a huge privilege that I get to be a cheerleader for these amazing stories. And that makes me really, really happy. What about somebody else? And is there anything I left out, guys?
How long did it take you to put it together? Or is it different for everyone, I guess?
I think it's probably different. I'll let somebody else answer that question. Anyone else want to share their how long it took?
For me, it was very, I remember when I sold in 2019 and they told me it's not going to come out until 2022. And I thought, oh my God, I'll be dead by 2020. That's forever. I was like, forget it. I'm never going to see the light of day. And I remember that wasn't enough time. It was like, and then this was, now that we measure time, like pre-COVID and after COVID, this was pre-COVID when we sold. And then the manuscript was being developed and due during COVID. And then we had so much craziness, like the shutdown. And then I had, my cousin passed away, who was like my sister. There was a few actually of my contributors whose family passed away, fathers, mothers. And that was hard to get a creative person to be creative when you were not feeling happy. And I remember even feeling like, if you don't want to do it, I mean, you can pull out. Like, I understand. And maybe it was just a very crazy time, but I remember it felt like it wasn't enough time. So it was like 2 to 3 years. And but it was just a few months that we had to, maybe about a year, to gather the stories and then to fix the stories and then to send them back and forth. What I liked, is like what Rose said, what I liked, and my editors, I remember there was some things my editors didn't like, and I was like, but I like it, so we're going to keep it because I like it, and that's the authenticity of our book, because I think our anthology was a little bit special because it was specific for a specific, it wasn't necessarily for a specific group, but there was we wanted it to be an authentic book about Mexican American culture. And so we didn't want to change it. I didn't want to change it. So there was all of that. So it was like, a year, 2 years? It takes a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to chime in really quickly and say I had a similar experience editing Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed. It sold in 2019 as well, and we knew that it was coming out in 2021. And obviously, this anthology is tackling a lot of stereotypes within the community, and so a lot of the writers actually had to go back into their memory bag and live through a lot of painful moments and some trauma. Actually. And so they were doing that all during a global pandemic where, we were trying to figure out what is COVID-19 and how is this going to affect our daily lives. And so everything was up in the air. So I just want to say, like, it's challenging to write in general, but to have a pandemic added on top of that, you know, your writing sort of just becomes like the last thing on your list, because you're like, I have to think about my mental health, I have to think about my family, I have to figure out, you know, like how I'm going to take care of my village, my community. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of the contributors really quickly, because they were phenomenal to work with. And, you know, we were really flexible on deadlines. So shout out to the publisher for understanding that like the world was literally on fire. And we were trying to make this book the best book that we could. And then just to go back to the inspiration really quickly, me myself as a Honduran, I haven't really seen myself reflected in any books. It's either I have to read books that feature Black characters, and then when I get like my Hispanic or Latinx characters in a book, they never look like me, they never sound like me. I never see like my particular family reflected. And so I decided it would be wonderful to have real life writers because I love fiction, but I was like, what about all these real life writers who are out there telling these stories? What if they tell their story and like the struggles that they experience, you know, the sexism, the racism, whatever ism, and what if they talk about that? Because for you, the young people watching, I remember what it was like to be 15, 16, and like I changed my identity several times. Like I remember one year I wore all Black just because I wanted to, and everyone was like, "Are you emo now? Are you in mourning?" And I was like, "No, I just like the color Black, and this is what I'm gonna wear my sophomore year." And so you know, your identity is in flux. You're figuring yourself out, and I just felt like having your favorite writers, right, like Elizabeth Acevedo, Lilian Rivera, have them talk about what their experience was like growing up and growing up inside of a Latinx community, to speak to those truths. And one of the things I love about this anthology being out in the world is so many people are sending me messages like, wow, I feel so validated. I feel understood now because I had no idea that there were other people who struggled with this part of their identity in the community. I thought I needed to be, you know, the ideal thing, which is what we see on TV or in media. And I'm like, no, like our culture, you know, our community is so diverse. And so being able to edit all of these voices and to have these true stories, right, these essays out there, and for people to know like, no, this is real life, it's not fiction. Again, fiction is wonderful, but these are real stories, like Rose, like you were saying, like these are the things that we really want to know, like how did you survive, you know, growing up and becoming the person that you are today. And so I hope that it brings all of you hope and let you know that like everyone is struggling no matter what, like we're all trying to figure it out. And the stuff that you're going through right now in your life, definitely adults in your life have gone through it too. I know teens are always like, you don't understand me, and it's like, no, actually I do, because kind of went through the same thing when I was your age. Maybe a little bit different, but pretty much the themes are the same.
That's amazing. You like read my mind for the next question, because I was going to talk about, you know, the inspiration behind gathering, you know, stories around a particular theme. And I know you mentioned, you know, breaking stereotypes and making sure that students or anybody, readers, could identify, you know, with a lot of the ideas that are out in the world right now that they're being affected by, and why you felt that putting a book like that together would be important. Did any of your authors turn in anything that was really surprising, or something that just blew your mind, you know, blew your socks off when you did your book?
Um, for me, there were actually two. Julian Randall sort of did a riff on Miles Morales. In their essay they have like, okay people, just like how in the movie. And I read it the first time and I was like, this is amazing. Like I love the way they structured the essay. I love the way they're taking us frame to frame, and of course they're a poet, so I was like, this is really cool. That essay really blew me away. And it was really fun to edit back and forth. Actually there were three, so I'll name three. The other one was Marco Shiro. So I know lots of people know Marco Shiro. They're amazing. they're also a transracial adoptee, and it's something that I've always have been, interested in them telling to the world, because you don't really hear about stories like that within the Latina community. And so I thought it was really important for them to tell their story. And the way they wrote their piece was also very interesting, because they framed it by age, right? So they're like, you're 9 years old and this is what's happening. Now you're 12 and this is what's happening. And I just felt like I was living their life, with them, walking with them through that structure. And then the other one that was sort of surprising was Zakia and Jamal. So her first draft of her essay, didn't really center herself. She was centering her grandmother, which, huge, impactful woman in her life. But I told her, I was like, I don't see you in this essay. And I said, let's talk about that. So we had a discussion, and she admitted something that I think a lot of us struggle with, is I don't feel like I am enough to write about. I don't feel like I'm in the community enough to actually tell these stories. She's a Black Cuban, and she's like, I don't speak Spanish. My grandmother is the one that's from Cuba. She was born there, so I feel like I need to be telling her story. And I'm like, no, but this is exactly what the readers need to see, right? Because we all struggle with that here, especially in the US, like, for people who are born here, when they go back to visit the country that they have a connection to, there's like a whole stigma, a whole thing that happens where they're like, oh, you're Americanized, you're Spanish, is this, or like the way you cook, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's a whole list. And I know we all experience it. We're always criticized when we go back. But I told her, I said, this exactly what you're feeling, that's what I want you to write. Because there is another little Zakia out there, another Black Cuban or a Dominican, Mexican, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it doesn't matter where they're from. There's just another person out in the world who's feeling exactly what you're feeling. And she said, you know what? I think you're right. I do need to push myself and actually tell my story and say how I'm connected to this culture and how I make it work for me. And I was like, exactly. And so working with her was a really special experience, because I think our job as editors of these anthologies is to pull out some of the things from these writers. And I think any editor, right? So even if it's a solo project, your job as an editor is to push the writer to tell the best story that they can. And so pulling this anthology together was sort of the same thing. Working with the writer to make sure, they told their story in a very authentic, truthful way, but also having them push the boundaries a little bit to go beyond themselves. But at the same time, understanding that there are certain moments that we don't want to share when you're writing nonfiction. And so also having a conversation about how to protect certain moments, right? And like skip over certain things, but still make it work so that like the reader can't really tell that you skipped a huge chunk, a huge chunk of your life experience. So that for me was really, really impactful. And I can talk about so many other essays in this book because I think they're all fabulous. But really, just getting to work with each of the writers and have conversations and make it a very collaborative effort first, and then bringing it to the publisher and having those editors take a look and agree with a lot of the feedback that we were already discussing was an amazing process.
Wow, that's amazing. Does anyone else want to share about, a lot of what shared about the inspiration behind, your collections and then your particular experiences with your authors?
I want to hear from Kwame.
Yeah, Kwame.
I want to know more about Black Boy Joy, how you got the idea, and given that you also write, so and I'm sure people watching, those of you watching, if you don't know, the incredible Tristan Strong books are Kwame's. That's the same guy. So from Rick Riordan Presents. So I'm gonna quit talking about Kwame. Can you share? I want to hear.
Sure, yeah. It is summer of 2020. So, I'm 5 months into, no, April, May, June. Yes, I am 4 to 5 months into the Animal Crossing for the Switch. Things are going amazing on my island. I am destroying people as I tend to do in the Battle Royale Apex Legends. I'm playing it. It is amazing. No one can stand against me. I am unstoppable, a force that just sweeps everyone away. Um, my son has just, my son is 2 months old, born in May of 2020. So, you know, we're life with a newborn, life with our first son, after previously having daughters, you know, things are a little bit different, trying to learn how to take care of that. So like, you know, we're in a pandemic. The shutdown has just happened. Everyone is in their homes. We're still trying to figure out, there's no vaccine and there's no booster. We're trying to figure out how do we mitigate, how do we handle this new normal that we're living under? Um, so all of this is going along. And then uh, a cop kneels on a black man's neck and kills him, right? So we are all at home and we all see this. And we are marching. We are marching. We are protesting. We are shouting. We are, it seems like for the infinitieth time, we are protesting the lack of humanity that it seems that Black bodies receive, right? Um, so we are doing all of this. And I am in the middle of this and I am seeing this and I am witnessing this and I'm like, I've why does this feel like deja vu, right? Like why does this feel so familiar? What are we marching towards, right? Because I feel like the cameras are always there to catch us at our worst, whether that worst be lack, frustration boiling over, whether our worst is we're dead in the street. The cameras are always there to catch us at our worst. And I wanted someone to catch us when we are at our, not at our best, but when we are not angry, but joyful, right? When we are not shouting, but we're smiling. No one ever catches that, right? You don't see that in the newspaper. You don't see the headlines like, you don't see black boy hits backflip for the first time, community celebrates. That's not a headline. That's never a headline. You don't see uh, kid successfully bakes grandmother's, famous recipe for the first time. Family loves it, and no, that's never a headline. That's never a trending topic, right? And yet, I wanted to be able to hand something to a black kid, um, specifically for me as my lived experience to a black boy. I wanted to hand them something and be like, you know what? I see you, right? I see you when you fold that paper airplane correctly for the first time and you beat your older brother's record, right? I see that joyful moment. Um, I see that first time, you get that validation that you are sorely missing. You get it from the person that you least expected, um, and that how that motivates you, how that drives you. I wanted to hand them a book, with stories that are just a repetition of that. Like we see you when everyone has gone away, but you are at your most joyful, at your happiest, when you are content in life. We see you, and that's I think what the was really the genesis for Black Boy Joy, and the way that I always pitch it and the way that I always describe it is that what this book is this book is a birthday celebration, right? So you don't have to be a black boy to enjoy the book, right? Because you don't go to someone else's birthday party unless you're my now 7-year-old and we're going through why isn't this about me. You don't go to someone else's birthday party and expect it to be about you, but you still go and you still have fun. You still go get a little slice of cake, you still go get maybe a little goodie bag, you still play some party games and dance, and you walk away. You don't have to clean up, you still have fun, right? That's what Black boy joy is. Even though we are celebrating the lived experiences of Black boyhood, you don't have to be a Black boy to enjoy and appreciate that. And I think that's what has really resonated with everyone, and why it has done as, I guess, as good as it has done. Because the contributors, there are 17 unique and individual definitions of joy, right? And in those 17 stories, we don't say that this is these are the 17 ways in which you can experience joy. There's an 18th way, there's a 19th way. These stories are examples of what joy means to us, and is an encouragement for you to navigate and to find your own path to what your joy is. It's amazing. All of the authors did absolutely incredible jobs in telling their stories, and whether it's prose or verse, or in the case of Jerry Craft, a comic. They're all unique, individual, and wonderful stories. And I'm just, as you said, Rose, I'm just happy that I get to champion them, because I don't know anyone who, if you were to ask them, "Do you want a little joy?" They're like, no, I'll pass. I'm full. I've had too much. That last course was just, oh, I could not stomach any more joy. I don't know anyone who does that.
That's true. Everybody wants to be happy. I love that. How about you, Margarita? What was your
Oh,
inspiration?
my inspiration was I used to teach 8th grade English and reading, and I remember as a child growing up, I read everything, and I never thought to look for myself in books. I guess I would read books with little girls, and I saw myself in these girls, and it wasn't until I started to wanted to know where the Mexican kids were, right? And I was like, where are the Mexican kids? You're right. So then I started looking for the Mexican kids, and I can't find them anywhere. I find them some places, and then we read those stories, and my students loved them. And then fast forward to 2016, 17, 18-ish, and we start hearing all this negative verbiage about Mexicans and Americans in the media. And I remember just being so frustrated and so angry and so upset because they were talking about my culture. The people that I knew, the Mexican Americans that I knew, the Mexicans I knew weren't what they were portraying in the media. We weren't the stereotypes that you see on TV. So I was just getting very upset. And I thought to myself, I want to do something. I'm just a little old librarian from the Valley. What do I do? Right. But I was like, I wanted to, and I thought about Rose. I mean, Rose is like my mentor. She doesn't know how much she's inspired me in her life. When I grow up, I'm going to be like Rose. So I thought about her anthology, and I was like, you know what? Rose is a librarian. I'm a librarian. Like, let me see what I can do. So I approached one of my really good friends, Guadalupe Garcia McCall, who's this amazing award-winning Mexican American librarian, and I told her about my idea. I want to do an anthology with short stories with all kinds of things celebrating the Mexican American culture. And I want it for everybody. I want it windows to us. I want the world to see us as we really are, and I want our kids, our young kids, to see themselves in these stories and be proud to be Mexican American and not be ashamed when people tell them things about our culture. So that was really, and she said, let's do it. So we did, she goes, go ask everybody we know. And our community in the Mexican American community is very, very small. So I did ask everybody we knew, and some people said yes, some people said no. And I started just, okay, so now what, right? I was going to make copies in the Xerox machine and pass them out to all my English teacher friends, because that's what I wanted it for. The English teacher classes for everybody to read culturally relevant literature in my area, because we didn't have it. I feel we didn't have enough. And so Lupita, she's amazing, was in New York with her agent, and told her agent that she was going to submit a story to me. So the agent was like, let me meet Margie. So her agent calls me, and I'm kind of like, I don't know anything about this agent. I don't know what that means. And it was kind of scary for somebody like me. I didn't have money for an agent. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And she was like, let me represent you. And I said, I don't have anything. I just have an idea and one person that said yes, Crazy Lupita. And she said, let's develop something. And we did. And she's like, I can sell it to one of the big five. And I was like, oh, what is that? And so she did. She helped me develop a like a proposal. And when you tell people you have an agent, they're a little bit, they talk to you a little bit more like, okay, well, maybe I'll submit a story. So then I was able to get people to like say, okay, I'll work with you. And whenever I got all of my people, she sold it to Random House, which was crazy, to Philomel, and it was crazy. And so we now have world in English and in Spanish, which is so like amazing because and then even to me, it was like, it was for all of our Mexican American kids. It's for all of us as Mexican American adults who didn't have this when we were kids. And it's for the world to see into our culture and to see who we really are. And it's like, he just said earlier, we have all these different, a lot of times whenever we write stories about the Mexican, about any people of color experience, it's always a struggle. And not that we don't struggle, we do, but we have joy too, we have happiness. So I wanted all the stories in this anthology to be, I wanted happy stories, sad stories, all kinds of stories. And so I was lucky with all of the contributors that I had. They're all these amazing, I don't even know how I got them all, but they're all amazing. Some of them award winning, some of them like super like amazing. And then I have some that, one girl who, this is the first time she's ever published. So I just felt like it was a very diverse cast in this anthology. And I'm just so proud of it, and so proud of all the work we did right in the middle of a global pandemic when all this craziness was going on, and everybody was so professional and still turned in their work. And because it was that important to us to get this book out for our community and for the world to see us as we really are. So that was my inspiration behind it.
So awesome. I love it. I think sometimes you think one thing about how things are put together, but then when you talk to people, it's so awesome to be enlightened about how anthologies are put together, how you get people to write the stories. So we're at the conclusion of our awesome panel discussion. So I have one question for everyone. Just something short and sweet. What do you think makes anthologies most appealing to teens and middle grade readers? And anyone can start.
I think since I'm going to wear my teacher hat for a minute, I mean, I am a teacher still. I just teach adults now, but I think one of the beauties of anthologies is that, number one, it's like bite-sized pieces, right? You can go in and you can step back out. For some kids, there are kids that just don't see themselves as readers. And so I think anthologies can be gateways in that respect. But like, it allows them to sample a bunch of, it's like going, to a buffet and you try a little of this and you're like, oh, that was delicious, I'm gonna go get some more. Or like, that didn't work for me, so I don't want to have that again. So it really helps kids, I think, find voices that speak to them. And then the other thing I think about anthologies is, at least for me, and I would bet if my panelists would all agree, when we do this kind of work, both of my anthologies I put together for charity. And part of the goal in doing that, besides doing some good in a world that often doesn't feel that way, and as a white lady, I have a lot of privilege that just comes with that. And so I'm always thinking about how I can try to use those opportunities that just come to me, whether I earn them or not. And so, but the other thing is, I think that it allows young people to also hopefully maybe find their own voice, because they can say, like, again, it's not just one style. And so, whether they're talking about their own shared experiences or their own individual experiences, their joy, their hope, any of those things, like, hopefully, I bet all of us would agree that, like, we want kids to recognize, like, their stories matter no matter what your experience is. You don't have to think, oh, like, my life isn't exciting enough. Like, you exist, you have a story, and it's worth sharing with other people, whether you write it, whether you tell it. It's a powerful thing. So for me, I think that's one of the benefits. Somebody else, what do y'all think about that?
I agree with everything you said. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was also going to say, as someone who has been struggling to read during the last, I guess we're in the third year of the pandemic, what I really like about short stories and anthologies and novellas and graphic novels is I can read a full piece and feel whole and feel like I'm still the avid reader that I once was pre-COVID, especially. But also, you know, I like to share stories with other people. And so I find that if I'm sharing something with them, I can be like, it's only 3 pages or it's only 5 pages. Just read, you know, just read this section and then let's talk about it. Because you know it's so much more fun when you get to read something and then talk about it with your book bestie. Um, so that for me is one of the reasons why I love anthologies, but also because whenever I'm looking for new voices or new writers to follow, which is honestly all the time, going to these anthologies is a good place, and short stories too. So like if you like if you're an SFF reader or a genre reader like myself, there's like Locust, there's Tor.com, like, you know, there's lots of other ways to read short stories and stuff like that too. But then like, I love it when people do compilations of like the best, you know, short stories of whatever year. And then I'm like, oh, I can just buy that because so many stories you know, so many short stories were published that year that I didn't get to read. So I can thumb through it and see like what was the best SFF that came out in like 2020 or 2021. And I have it all there. And then I can find and discover new voices and go and support their work. So I think they work best for pretty much anyone, especially reluctant readers. If you're like a reader who is like, I want to read more books, but I'm not ready for a full novel, I would definitely pick up an anthology.
Excellent points. And also, if students want to start writing, then just write anything. They can just write, you know, one little story about what happened to them, what brought them joy, you know, like Kwame's collection. You know, let's look at one of his stories and then you kind of mirror something like that. I always like doing things like that with my kids who struggle to read and are reluctant to write as well. Well, I want to thank everyone. Does anyone have any final thoughts to close our session? I loved talking to you and listening to you and your experience with gathering your stories and connecting with your authors in the process. And most importantly, what inspired you to bring these stories to the world. Does anyone have any concluding thoughts? No?
Just thank you.
Oh,
for
thank
being
you. Thank you
here.
all so much. I love reading all of them. I can't wait. I think the only one I have missing is Miss Rose Brock's. I want to read that one as well. But
It's
thank you
coming,
guys.
the new one.
Yes. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you coming, and hello to everyone at the NTTBF. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having us. Bye, everyone.
Yes, bye.
Bye.